I'm going to start this talk off with a history question, because history is what I love. Have you ever heard of these names before? Crispus Attucks, C.J. Walker, Josh Gibson. Maybe one, maybe zero. Maybe you recognize the names, but that's it. Most likely you did not recognize these names because they were left out of history class. Well, I just named the first casualty of the American Revolution, first black woman millionaire in American history, and a man who hit over 800 home runs in professional baseball. Why are we not taught about these famous Americans? In 2004, Geneva Gay, a professor of multicultural studies at University of Washington, summed up the general feelings of African American students about the subject of social studies. She said that social studies education has a long history of not being very popular with or valued by students in urban schools. A reason this is the case is because the content and priorities of the field may not meet the needs of urban students. I can only imagine what some students might feel when they learn that they should respect old white men in history that have owned slaves, done horrible things. It's bogus. A group of students in the urban school felt just the way Gay had described before. And I'll give you some quotes. Student: I'm not saying that everything they say in school is what's up or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. It's who was supposed to be a historical person? Who was important? You know what I mean? That is something that they will basically tell you at school. So teachers lie. Books lie, or whatever. But they can't just make a person up and write that down and put it in a book. This is what another student said to respond to that. But they can leave people out of the book. Another student says, why would they take away role models? Black role models. They always be we need them, so why not put them in the book? End quote. This disinterest in social studies has shown in advanced placement courses, or AP, will self-proclaim to put you on the right path to college and career success. The statistics are startling. In 2008, white students averaged a 2.7 on the AP United States History exam. Meanwhile, black students averaged a whole point lower, a 1.7. Hispanic students did a little better by averaging half a point lower than their white counterparts. I took AP US History back in high school. Now that I think back to those days, I know that the content being taught in that class was geared toward a white audience. By missing out on the AP credit, more often than white students, minority students are missing out on college credit and an important step ahead in their academic careers. Disengagement in social studies class by minority students needs to end. It is known that people who study history go on to become lawyers, politicians, and important members of society. We cannot leave out an important part of the population from these fields. I am Jack Pancak, and I am studying to become a future social studies educator. And I strongly believe that utilizing a culturally relevant pedagogy in social studies classrooms will increase engagement and effort for minority students. Culturally relevant what did I say? Yeah, that's right. Culturally relevant pedagogy. Gloria Ladson-Billings introduced the pedagogy in 1994 in her book, The Dream Keepers. She describes it as an approach that empowers students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural referrals to impact knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Ladson-Billings also says that in order to employ this the teacher needs to utilize the backgrounds, knowledge, and experiences of the students to inform the teacher's lessons and methodology. When I read this, and when I think about it in terms of social studies, this means to teach the history relevant for the students. I think this increases interest because the students can actually see themselves in the history they are learning. For example, if I am teaching World War II to a class full of African American students, I don't want to just focus on the heroics of a segregated white unit. Instead, I will teach about topics like the Tuskegee Airmen, the mistreatment of black units on base, or the first African American woman to be sworn into the Navy Norse Corps during the time, Phyllis May Daly. Something I have done in class that students enjoyed was talking about the forgotten soldiers of Ghana during the First World War. It later sparked an independence movement and a lot of fight against colonial rule in the country while they fought against the Germans and fought alongside their white counterparts. In addition to teaching relevant history based on the students' backgrounds, Ladson Billings makes it clear that the pedagogy helps create a bridge between students' home and school lives. No longer will we think that student home lives do not directly affect performances in schools. It is also important to have high expectations for these students when using this strategy. If we treat them if we treat them to be not as smart as suburban white students, they'll actually start thinking that is actually true. Another point is to help students develop a critical consciousness through which they will challenge the status quo of the current social order. I feel like I would not be a proper social studies teacher if I wasn't doing this. This is what America is all about, or what it should be about. We want students to be active citizens. We need to improve this country for all, including minorities. This culturally relevant pedagogy that I just told you about is the perfect for the social studies classroom. Like I said before, a goal of social studies already is to develop a critical consciousness. Now let's extend that to minority students in issues that really matter to them. Social studies is also perfect because it is less based on standards that sometimes math classes and science classes are geared towards. Now that everyone knows a little bit about the teaching of Gloria Ladson Billings and her culturally relevant pedagogy, I'm going to talk about how this has been working in schools across the country. The Research Alliance for New York City Schools looked at 5 different schools to see how the pedagogy is being used and if it is working. The Acorn Community High School in Brooklyn, New York, has been giving teachers professional development on the strategy. They learned how to incorporate student culture into school environment and classroom instruction. They were taught how to use pop culture, such as the show The Boondocks, to elicit student perspectives on race. The result, that students and teachers alike have said that participation has increased to how relatable the content being taught was. And this is what we want. This pedagogy does not come easy though. At the High School for Law and Public Services in Washington Heights, Manhattan, teachers said they are sometimes uncomfortable talking about the issues of race. And it's not easy. To combat this, teachers had professional learning communities, or PLCs, in order to discuss issues of race. When implemented in the classrooms, teachers felt that students were empowered by the topics. It was worth it to have those PLCs. One of the most famous cases of culturally relevant pedagogy was at Prescott Elementary School in Oakland, California. When one walks into the school, you can see the school walls are elaborately decorated with images depicting the cultures of the students at the school. Veteran teacher Carrie Secret has been employing culturally relevant pedagogy since the 1990s. She says that she is proud of her schools because students feel a sense of ownership at the school. Prescott has a reputation for high achievement for their minority students. To make my point clear, culturally relevant pedagogy has worked and can be seen flourishing at schools in New York City all the way to Oakland. I'm going to be honest with everyone here. Talking about this as a white male is uncomfortable at times. I know people will think I'm just another white, middle-class, suburban guy who will try to save the kids in the hood with my middle-class work ethic. But that is not the case. Instead of trying to make students adapt to my own teaching style, I will adapt to their learning style. I will do my best to learn about culturally relevant theory. I will allow veteran minority teachers to mentor me. I will be an ally to minority groups and their struggle. I will try to do everything in my power to make education more equitable. I see myself as the Peter Norman of teaching. Well, Peter who? Peter Norman. Peter Norman was the white guy on the podium alongside Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the 1968 Olympics. Not too many people know this, but Peter Norman was an avid supporter of their cause and was wearing the Olympic Project for Human Rights button on his shirt, which supported black athletes across the globe. This button would later get him in trouble in his home country, Australia. Right before they got to the podium that day, John Carlos told Norman what was about to happen. Carlos expected to see fear in Norman's eyes, but instead he saw love. I see myself as a teacher version of Peter Norman because he was an ally to the ongoing civil rights movement. He learned from black veterans, and without making the matter about himself, showed love in supporting the cause. In my conclusion, in order to wrap things up before I have to go, minority students are falling behind in social studies. As a future teacher, I cannot be okay with this. Social studies education is immensely important in becoming an active citizen in this country. Culturally relevant pedagogy will help turn this trend around, and it will increase engagement and efforts from minority students. Professor Ladson Billing explains the Pedagogy Perfect in her book, The Dream Keepers. This strategy she's pioneered works well across the country, from Oakland to New York City and many more schools in between. I'm excited to get my first teaching job and be able to use this strategy in the classroom. Thank you for your time today, and have a great one.